On the surface, inflation seems like just another word economists whisper on television, a graph line pointing upward, a percentage announced each month. But behind the numbers lies something far more sinister. Inflation is not just statistics. It is the hidden tax you pay every single day. A tax without legislation, without consent, and without escape. Imagine waking up one morning. You pour coffee into your favorite mug, open your wallet, and realize the bills inside buy less than they did last week. The bread at the bakery costs more. The bus ticket eats a larger bite of your salary. The rent due at month's end has climbed again. Nothing in your wallet has changed, except its power. That invisible theft is inflation. Governments rarely call it what it is. Instead, they speak of price adjustments, currency fluctuations, or temporary pressures. But the effect is brutal. Inflation erodes savings, reduces purchasing power, and punishes those who can least afford it. Unlike income tax, where citizens at least see the bill, inflation hides in every transaction, every trip to the supermarket, every rent payment slipped under the landlord's door. The mechanics are deceptively simple. When governments or central banks create more money than the economy produces in real goods and services, each unit of money loses value. If a society prints twice as much currency while producing the same amount of bread, milk, and fuel, the inevitable result is higher prices. Your money is diluted, stretched thinner, worth less. It is as if someone poured water into your wine. The glass looks full, but the taste is weaker. History is littered with victims of this hidden tax. In the 1920s, Germany, inflation spiraled into absurdity. Wheelbarrows of money needed for bread. In the 1970s, Americans watched gas stations change prices daily, while wages failed to keep up. In Argentina, entire generations grew up knowing their savings would vanish in months. Inflation does not merely touch numbers, it shapes lives. But here's the cruelest twist. Inflation benefits those who caused it. Governments that print money pay off debts with bills that are worth less tomorrow. Borrowers see their loans shrink in real terms, while savers watch their wealth evaporate. It is a silent transfer of value, from citizens who save to institutions that spend. That is why many call inflation a hidden tax. It raises revenue for governments without a single law being passed. And for ordinary families, the impact is relentless. The weekly grocery trip feels heavier, not because of the bags, but because of the receipt. Children's shoes cost more. Utilities creep upward. The bus ride to work eats away another coin. Every choice tightens. Do you skip the doctor? Do you cut back on food? Do you work longer hours just to stand still? Inflation presses hardest on those who cannot escape it. Meanwhile, those with assets, stocks, property, businesses, often ride above the storm. As prices climb, so do the values of their holdings. The middle and lower classes, who hold their wealth in wages and cash, bear the brunt. Inflation, in this way, is not just economic. It is social. It widens the gap between rich and poor, fueling resentment and unrest. And as you listen to this, ask yourself, have you felt this hidden tax in your life? The rent that always rises, the groceries that no longer fit in your budget, the savings account that seems smaller each year. If you want to keep uncovering truths like this, the forces shaping your life quietly, every day, make sure to subscribe to the channel now and leave a comment sharing your experience with inflation. Your story matters, and it's part of this hidden history. Inflation is not always dramatic, but it is always present. Sometimes it creeps at 2% a year, so subtle you barely notice. Other times, like in Venezuela or Zimbabwe, it explodes, burning entire currencies into ash. But in both cases, it is the same enemy, the silent tax that punishes discipline, savings, and stability while rewarding debt and recklessness. And yet, politicians often welcome it. They may deny it publicly, but privately they know. Inflation eases the burden of colossal government debt. Instead of raising taxes directly, they let inflation do the work invisibly. Voters rarely protest against rising prices as they would against a new tax law. The anger is diffuse, the blame unclear. Inflation thrives in this fog of confusion. The irony is that many people think of money as stable, as something fixed, but money is a mirror. It reflects policy, confidence, and scarcity. And when that reflection is distorted, the world you see becomes distorted too. In every society that suffered from inflation, people learned the same painful lesson. Money is not a solid foundation. It is shifting sand. If inflation were only a ghost from history books, it would be easier to ignore. But it is alive, pulsing through economies today, shaping the lives of billions. Every decade has its story, every generation its scar. To understand why it feels so heavy, so suffocating, we need to trace how inflation has stalked the modern world, from the Latin American crises to the global shocks of our own century. Take Argentina, a nation once among the wealthiest in the world. By the late 20th century, it had become a laboratory of inflation. Families rushed to grocery stores the moment they were paid, knowing that waiting even a week meant their wages would buy less. Children learned math not in school books, but in daily survival, dividing prices that doubled every few months, recalculating meals, postponing dreams. Grandparents told stories of savings wiped out not once, but several times across their lifetimes. In Argentina, inflation was not an occasional storm. It was the climate itself. Venezuela offers another cautionary tale. In the 2010s, as oil revenues collapsed and money printing surged, the bolivar crumbled. Bills became cheaper than toilet paper. Supermarkets locked their shelves, forcing shoppers to race inside when doors opened, grabbing anything before prices changed by the hour. Doctors emigrated, businesses closed, and yet the government kept adding zeros to the currency, as if more digits could disguise the emptiness. Inflation became not just economic, but psychological, eroding trust in institutions, in contracts, even in hope. But we don't need to look only to extreme cases. Even in the United States, inflation has left scars. In the 1970s, the oil shocks turned everyday life into a slow bleed. Lines at gas stations stretched for blocks. Families cut vacations. Wages lost ground against climbing prices. Stagflation entered the vocabulary. An economy stagnant, yet still bleeding its citizens through inflation. It wasn't war or revolution that shook the middle class. It was the silent drip of lost purchasing power. Fast forward to the 21st century. After the 2008 financial crisis, central banks across the world turned to an experiment: quantitative easing, massive money creation to stabilize economies. For years, inflation seemed asleep, tamed by technology and globalization. But the pandemic of 2020 woke it. Lockdowns shattered supply chains, governments printed trillions, and prices surged. Suddenly, families everywhere faced grocery bills higher than ever, housing more unaffordable than memory, wages lagging behind. The hidden tax once again revealed its face: universal, unrelenting. And yet, politicians often tell a softer story. They call it temporary, manageable, within targets. They say it is under control. But for the family at the gas pump, for the retiree on a fixed pension, for the student watching tuition rise, the numbers don't feel controlled. They feel like theft in slow motion. The percentage on a government report is a number, but in real life, it is a skipped meal, a postponed dream, a future dimmed. The cruel irony is that inflation is not equal for all. Those who own land, stocks, and real estate often gain. Their assets climb with prices. But wage earners, renters, savers, they lose. A worker paid the same salary watches it shrink invisibly. A retiree sees savings evaporate. A renter faces a landlord who raises rent because costs are rising. Inflation is an amplifier of inequality. It whispers wealth to the rich and shouts hunger to the poor. That is why many economists call inflation regressive. It falls hardest on those with no shield, no assets, no flexibility, no escape. The rich can hedge with investments, shift funds, buy gold. The poor must simply endure. And endurance, when prolonged, breeds despair. But what can one do? Some turn to hard assets, real estate, commodities, even cryptocurrencies. Others diversify savings, seeking to stay ahead of the erosion. Yet no strategy is perfect. The lesson, repeated through centuries, is not that you can defeat inflation, but that you must respect it. Recognize it as the invisible adversary lurking in every society. Think of it this way: wars, revolutions, pandemics. These are loud disasters. Inflation is a quiet one. It creeps at night, alters the numbers in silence, and leaves citizens bewildered when the morning bill arrives. And perhaps that is why it endures. Because it is subtle, because it is hidden, because it feels like no one is to blame, when in truth, choices are made in marble halls, far from the markets where families shop. The danger, of course, is what comes next. Societies that live long under inflation grow restless. They turn against institutions, against governments, against one another. They long for stability, even if offered by dangerous hands. History shows the path. Weimar Germany, Venezuela, Zimbabwe. When money ceases to be trusted, people seek anyone who promises order, and they often find tyrants. That is why inflation is not merely economics. It is political, social, even existential. A nation that cannot trust its money cannot trust its future. And a people stripped of savings, of stability, of dignity, will cling to any promise of rescue, however dark. So when you next feel prices rising, do not think only of economics. Think of history. Think of the countless families before who watched their money vanish, and think of what kind of society is built when that erosion is ignored. Inflation is not a storm that passes. It is a tax, and it is collected every day. And now I want to hear from you. How has inflation touched your life? Was it in the grocery aisle, at the gas pump, in your rent, in your paycheck? Leave a comment, because your story is part of the bigger story, and sharing it builds the memory we too easily lose.